I'm Justice Jennifer Brunner, Justice of the Ohio Supreme Court and candidate for Chief Justice in 2022. Welcome to Achieving Justice. This is what I call a mini podcast series where I have the delightful opportunity to interview judicial candidates up and down the ballot, running at the same time as I am throughout the state of Ohio. I'm so pleased to have with me today Douglas Nobles, who is a candidate for the Domestic Relations Court in Franklin County, Ohio. And Doug, welcome, and so pleased to have you today.
Good afternoon. How are you doing?
Great, thank you. So, Doug Nobles, tell us about your background and experience and what led you to run for judge of the Domestic Relations Court in Franklin County.
Well, currently I am a prosecutor with the city attorney, Klein. I've been there for the last 3.5 years, and I work in the immunity division of the court, and that deals with your lower level crimes, theft, your traffic cases, things like that. I've been doing that, like I said, for 3.5 years. Prior to that, I was a public defender, and that's where I started my career. I started my career as a public defender, as a law clerk in the Common Pleas division, which deals with felonies. And after law school, I became an attorney at the public defender's office, and I was there for 7.5 years. And then I decided after 7.5 years, why not try to do something a little different? So that's why I switched over to become a prosecutor for the city attorney. In between that, I was staff attorney for Judge Terry Jameson in the same court I'm running for. And actually, it's the same seat I'm running for because she won, and then then Governor DeWine appointed someone. So that seat is up for this year. So that's a quick overview of how I started my career. So I've been in the legal career for almost 16 years, and I always tell people that I'm a public defender at heart still. Even though I'm a prosecutor, I spent a lot of my time as a public defender. And I have the unique experience of being a public defender, prosecutor, and staff attorney.
So you've got kind of balanced view of the prosecution side, the defense side, and what it's like to look at it from the eyes of the court, correct?
Yes, and I think that's very important. And like I said, there aren't too many people out there that kind of have done both sides. And I think it's important. And I think it's important if you're going to run for judge that you understand both sides. I've learned a lot as a prosecutor over the last 3.5 years. As a public defender, you have one job, and that is to defend your client. As a prosecutor, you have multiple jobs. You have to take the interests of the state. You have to look at the victims. That's something I learned a lot in the last couple of years. Because as a public defender, you often don't think about the impact on victims because your job is to help your client. But as a prosecutor, I have to weigh the public interest, safety issues, and victim rights issues. So it gives me a nice balance now over the last 11 years as an attorney of seeing the importance of making sure that we protect the rights of victims and we protect the rights of those who are accused of a crime. Interesting.
So what I was thinking about when you and I were having a little discussion before we started this, I don't think in my years as a judge in Franklin County and growing up in Franklin County, there has ever been an African-American male on the Common Pleas Court Domestic Relations Division. Am I right about that?
Yeah, yes. To my knowledge and what I've been told, I would be the first if I win African-American male in Franklin County in the Domestic Relations Division. And only the second in the state, if I remember correctly, from what I was told, was one other judge in Cuyahoga County. So yes, I would be.
So, this court handles not just divorces and separations, but also, family issues, child custody, that sort of thing, but also juvenile justice issues as well, correct?
Yes, it's the juvenile criminal docket. So yes, that's a decent side part of the docket is the juvenile criminal things like that. So yes.
And right now, I know in the past there was sort of a practice in that court that one judge would be the one appointed or named by the rest of the judges to handle the juvenile issues, but now all of them are handling them, correct?
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
So I mean, what do you think that would mean to the viewpoint of the families who are dealing with kids with delinquency problems going through that court?
So I think this is where I think I would really hopefully be helpful there, because as a public defender and a current prosecutor, I've kind of seen both sides. And one thing I learned as a public defender and even as a prosecutor is that there's a reason why people are there. You know, there's a reason why people come to court. And I think it's important, at least with the juvenile docket, that we figure out why these young children are there and why are they in front of us as judges. And a lot of times is because of lack of opportunity or resources. So I want to connect the community. And what I mean by is find ways to understand why that young juvenile is there, because a lot of times it's because of a reason. It's because of issues in the house. It's because of mental health. It's because of drug and alcohol. It's because their mother or father is working and they're just not around, and we can figure these issues out. And we do, hopefully, then we can keep them from moving to the adult system. And then in turn, we can help the family, right? So we help the overall family. They'll make the overall, they'll make us better, and that'll help us all out, right? So I can hopefully help the juvenile and then help their mother or father or grandmother or whoever's there with them.
That's really something. And it's amazing that only 2 in the entire state of Ohio, African-American male juvenile court judges.
And I hope maybe that, I'm sorry, but I hope maybe that seeing me or maybe may help give them some, and I can use my experience, from a public defender and prosecutor to maybe find out and try to, find ways to help these young children. So.
But you're a father too, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm a father of 2 boys, 10 and 6, and my wife's currently pregnant with our 3rd, which will be our first girl. And she's due the week of the election. So we have a lot going on here. We got a 5th grader, 1st grader, and a newborn coming.
Oh my word. Wow. But, I think when you bring your life experience and your work experience and now your parenting experience, this seems like a pretty great combination.
Yeah. And I think being a parent, like I've really learned a lot. So not just my public defender and prosecutor things. I think as a parent, you understand that they're children, right? Especially my 10-year-old, and they're young and they're not fully developed and they need help. And sometimes from my experience as a staff attorney and public defender, some of the issues we see over in that court is because they're young children and they need to be helped. And a lot of times they're not inherently bad. Right. So we got to find a way to help them and move them along and get them off that path that will send them to the next system, which is where I work currently, or even worse, to the common pleas system, which is felonies. So I'm going to use all that experience to try to help out whoever comes in front of me.
Yeah. So for people who are watching, if they're not familiar with the court system, municipal is misdemeanors, which are lower level crimes, and common pleas is felonies, which are higher level crimes all the way up to death penalty. But then, of course, I think what's interesting is in the juvenile justice system, the kids are not really termed to be crimes, and they can be adjudicated delinquent. And then there's the question of, are they required to be bound over to adult court if it's a serious enough crime? Or there's the discretionary part where the judge would have the discretion whether to keep them as amenable to juvenile justice or send them on to common pleas court. I'm sure you've given that quite a bit of thought.
Yeah, and I have, and I know unfortunately there's been an uptick in that kind of those issues because of what's going on locally. So yes, I have, and I think this will be a very tough decision, but a case by case decision. I think in each case, I have to take that and each one and think about each one separately. So I think it's a very tough decision for judges in that court to make.
Yeah, absolutely. Even though there's certain factors in the statute, it's a highly discretionary decision. And the importance of this is that when it's reviewed by a court of appeals, it would have to be a very severe abuse of discretion, the abuse of discretion standard, which is a tough one to prove. So the responsibility and the importance of that role of the juvenile judge is really hard to overemphasize.
It is, and it's something I've thought about, and I saw when I worked for Judge Jameson, and I had to help her do several opinions on how do you make that decision. so I can hopefully kind of go back to what I learned working with her. But yes, it's a very tough thing to do, a very hard thing to do because these are still children.
Right, right. Exactly, exactly. And I think that area, I mean, as a justice on the Supreme Court now, we often review those cases and decide that they are cases of great general or public interest that we bring in for a jurisdictional review. And you look at the sort of the history of that and how it's evolved because the legislature gets involved with it as well.
Yeah.
And it's still a pretty evolving area.
Yeah.
So the work of a judge is not really always similar to the work of campaigning, is it?
No, it's not. Campaigning is a whole nother animal. It's my first time doing it. And like we spoke earlier, I don't know how you do 88 counties because the one county I'm doing is too much. It feels overwhelming some days, you know?
Yes,
Um,
yes. But I find on a campaign that I get ideas from people, and it's nice to hear their points of view and see their lives in different places I didn't even know in my own county were there. Are you
yeah.
seeing some of that?
Yeah, actually, that happened to me. And I went to a Worthington picnic and I had talked to a woman who was very had strong opinions on traffic cases, and I couldn't understand why. We talked for a while, and this is what I do. Partly what I do in my courtroom is those traffic cases, accidents, and driving while you're impaired. And then I found out that her husband was killed by someone who ran a red light, and the person never was charged. And so we talked for 20 minutes, and now I understood why she was so adamant. And she had talked to her local state representative, and it was a very sad story, but it gave me a different perspective on the impact that traffic laws have on people, you know. And it was a very good conversation. She actually emailed me later on, and we kept up our conversation for a few days
Oh,
on
wow.
what she wants to see change and what she wants to see, you know, to be different.
Yeah. And I've heard of people outside of Ohio talk about the fact that our judges have to run for election
Yeah.
and that they think that's a very terrible thing. But if you hadn't had that experience in going to that picnic, that's just one dimension that wouldn't be part of what you're going
Right.
to be to the bench.
Right. And I never, right. And I think that you're right. Seeing and talking to people, you do get that different perspective and you do get that different voice. And I never considered that before, even though I've dealt with those crashes. When you heard it from someone and you see the pain they have in their face, you realize that, wow, but you're right. It does put us out there and you get to meet people of different viewpoints. And I think it's very important.
Me too. Me too. So I'm excited for you in what lies ahead. We're at this point of recording this, we're just a little over 3 months from the election. And then you've got to look forward to the last week of the election, maybe having a new member of your
I
family.
know it's a lot. It's a lot to think about that we can have all that going on. So I'm trying to take it day by day and
Yeah.
just trying to just not get too far out in front of myself because it's a lot to think about.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you one last question.
Yeah.
So you've been in front of a lot of judges as a public defender and both as a prosecutor and judicial demeanor. People talk about that, and what do you? And it's pretty hard to teach someone a demeanor, but
Yeah.
you seem pretty calm. And what do you see as a good judicial demeanor?
Oh, I think one thing I learned over my years and being in court is you do have to be calm, but you have to be consistent, right? And I'm not going to name names, but there's been judges in my past that were not consistent. One day they're here, next day they're over here. But the ones that I like are the ones that are consistent and they're fair and they're objective. And you got to have a little bit of empathy too, right? Because you're there as a public servant. You're there to serve the public, so you have to be empathetic too, right? So I think consistency and empathy is a really big thing, and just trying to be calm and not be over moved by certain facts and just be objective. And I think that's very important. And I think the lawyers appreciate that. And I always appreciate the judges. I didn't always agree who were always consistent because I knew what I was getting and you knew they were fair.
Yeah, that's great. Oh, I think that's a beautiful description. And I know sometimes in felony court, which is where I was as a trial judge, some of the situations in front of you were so sad that you looked around the courtroom and even the reporters were crying.
Yeah.
And the one thing I learned as a judge so that I didn't fall prey to that too, was if you look up, you just can't cry.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a tough job because there's a
It-
lot of emotions involved and you have to be pretty objective and you can't be too much. So I think it's a very tough job.
yeah. But
Looking forward to it if I win.
yeah, well, I know it's a hard thing to do to campaign, and I know there's a lot of people who are glad that you stepped up to run. So thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you for having me on, and good luck on your campaign as well.
Oh, thank you. So this is Justice Jennifer Brunner, Justice of the Ohio Supreme Court, and I've had with me today Douglas Nobles, a candidate for the Domestic Relations Division of the Franklin County Common Pleas Court here in Columbus, Ohio. Thank you so much, Doug, and I wish you the best.
Thank you.
Thank you.